Hello friends, my name's Emile and welcome back to some more Reach the Peak, the show where you guys usually recommend the cars and then I take them up our hill climb course. However, in a bit of a change of pace for episode 20, I decided what we would do is use the Horizon Random Wheelspins to pick the cars that are going to be going up the hills for today. The first car that I get from the Wheelspin is something a little bit interesting that I've never driven before in Horizon. It's the Penhall, the Koala, I believe it is. It should be pretty well set up. It is an off-road buggy, so we'll have to see how that fares. The next car, which I managed to get from the Wheelspin, I had to spend an awful lot of money on these, was, well, the Lancia Delta HF Integrale Evo, a car which wasn't actually recommended, which was a little bit strange because this car is usually quite popular. I really like the Delta, so I was quite happy with the fact that I managed to get this on the Wheelspin there. Moving on to our next Wheelspin, I managed to capture the 1992 Honda NSX-R, which has been a relatively widely requested car, so yeah, hopefully the people are happy with that one. It should fare pretty well, although we will have to see. It is a low power supercar, so next up, we actually get something a little bit interesting. We do get the Ford Focus RS Horizon Edition from the Wheelspin, so another Horizon Edition to go up the peak. We've had quite a few of them. We'll have to see how this one fares. They usually do pretty darn well when it comes to reaching the peak. And the final car that I managed to draw for today, well, it was a Jeep Wrangler Rubicon. Yeah, I mean, I can see why no one's requested that. I wouldn't say it's a particularly popular car. But that's what we got, that's what we're working with, so there you go. That's all 5 cars I managed to get from the Wheelspins, and we're going to be kicking things off with the first car that I got, which is the 2011 Penhall, the Koala. 196 horsepower, 190 foot-pound of torque, 2,200 pounds of weight. This is a B-class car, 667 in PI. It is equipped with the snow tyres from standard. It is the least powerful vehicle here today, the least torquey vehicle here today, and the lightest vehicle here today. So, as previously stated, I have never once driven this car. I've never even looked at it twice, to be perfectly honest with you. These sort of off-road buggies, they just aren't really my thing. I appreciate that they're kind of cool. This one's especially cool because it's rear engine. You can actually see that engine sort of hanging out the back, which is pretty neat, but ultimately I don't drive a lot of these buggies. I don't usually like the way they drive, so that's usually the reason I do avoid them. However, the Penhall, it is an odd car to drive, do not get me wrong. It feels like it's going to lose grip at any moment, but it doesn't. It's actually quite great. It's an odd but great car to drive, let's put it that way. The one thing I really liked about the Koala is it was just super well set up for this course. It is only a B-class car, you know, 667 in PI, it's got rear-wheel drive, it shouldn't work, but because the gearbox is super short ratio, the suspension's nice and soft, it's really very good indeed. The rear engine rear drive, I thought maybe that could make it sort of bog down a little bit, but no, it actually pushed it forward. You know, rear engine rear drive obviously gives you great acceleration, but you know, I was expecting to have so much weight over the rear end it would sort of drag the car down almost, and it just didn't. It was really very well. It was well set up for this course. You know, if you want a B-class car to drive up this course, this is what you need to go for. You know, it is probably the best setup car for this course. I'm sure you could do something yourself with tuning, but you know, as far as ready-made out the box goes, I don't think we're ever going to have a B-class car that's sort of as capable or as well set up for the course as this is. You know, I wouldn't drive it anywhere else. You know, the gearbox is stupid short, but for a track like this, it works perfectly. So, yeah, a car which I've never driven before, but it was hugely surprising to me, and ultimately, at the end of the day, I actually ended up kind of liking the Penhall. Moving on now to the next car, 1992 Lancia Delta HF Integrale, 210 horsepower, 224 foot-pound of torque, 2,872 pounds of weight. This is an A-class car, 701 in PI. I should quickly point out this car weighs 6 pounds more than it should, because it has some aesthetic body mods on it. It has the rally lights and the mud flaps, and they do add 6 pounds of weight, so there you go, in case you was curious about that. Anyways, the Delta, one of my all-time favourite rally cars. I really like this thing. It's just it's such a capable vehicle. You know, it's not, you know, hugely exciting to look at. I really like the look of it, do not get me wrong. But when you compare it to some of the rally cars of the day, you know, it isn't hugely exciting to look at, but it was one of the most successful rally cars of all time. I believe this picked up 6 manufacturers championships or something along those lines. Stupid successful car from like 92 to 98, I believe is when they dropped the Delta. I'm not too sure. Either way, HS Integrale, this is sort of the homologation-y special one that isn't the S4. Anyways, to drive, what is it like? It has absolutely excellent handling. Little bit slow though. You know, 210 horsepower four-wheel drive vehicles, they do tend to feel slow. You know, let me cast your mind back to the Subaru Legacy. That was a very, very similar vehicle, in the sense that it was a good car, it just wasn't hugely quick, and this sort of has that. Admittedly, this handles better than the Legacy, and this is actually probably a little bit quicker than the Legacy because it doesn't weigh as much. But yeah, it's not the most exhilarating car to drive up here, do not get me wrong, but I still dearly love the Delta. You know, as far as cars to go rallying with, you can't really go wrong with this thing. Admittedly, the dirt tyres, again, they put it up into just the bottom of A-Class, but if you want to fill this thing out to full A-Class, it is a very capable vehicle. Hell, if you're sort of rallying on the mainland, you can usually get away with just street tyres and take this thing to B-Class. It's very, very capable. And I would recommend giving the Delta a try if you haven't already, but I'm assuming most people probably have. We move on next to the third car of today, which is the 1992 Honda NSX-R, 276 horsepower, 217 foot-pound of torque, 2,712 pounds of weight, A-Class car, 781 in PI, when equipped with the snow tyres. So this is the NSX in stock form. There is an upgrade hero which has been recommended to me, and I'm going to be driving that up the course at some point shortly. But for now, this is what you got to deal with, the standard 92 NSX. Ultimately, I really like the Honda NSX. It is one of my favourites of sort of the Japanese sports cars, I guess. Me personally, I'm much more a fan of the 2002 fixed headlight model and, you know, the more modern 2017 NSX over the 92, which is a controversial opinion to have. Most people prefer the old NSX, but for me, this design doesn't really do a whole lot for me, but it's still a pretty cool car, so, you know, it is what it is. Anyways, as far as to drive up here, I wasn't really sure what to expect. It's mid-engine, it's rear drive, but it hasn't got all that much power, you know, 276 horsepower going through what is essentially most people would call a supercar. I would refrain from calling it a supercar, but I can, you know, I'm not going to argue with people who do. Ultimately, it's fairly decent. It can get bogged down a bit. Again, it's just a factor of having that weight more biased towards the rear, I guess. You know, unlike the Penhall, which can deal with it, this really can't. It does feel like it's getting sort of bogged down occasionally, but overall, it's a fairly decent car, fairly capable off-road vehicle, which you wouldn't usually expect to say about the NSX, but yeah, it is solid, it is what it is. As far as mid-engine supercars to drive on dirt, you know, the NSX isn't the worst choice you could make, just because it hasn't got all that much power. It's very easily tunable. You could probably make this thing into a rally car monster if you put, like, I don't know, put it into S1 class and stuck stupid amounts of power into it. I'm sure it would be a pretty entertaining vehicle. I'm not sure if it would be any good, but entertaining, certainly, so yeah. Next up, we have the Horizon Edition that we got. This is the 2017 Ford Focus RS Horizon Edition. It has 350 horsepower, 350 foot-pound of torque, 3,390 pounds of weight. It is an S1 class car, 824 in PI. It is the most powerful vehicle here today, the vehicle with the highest torque here today, and the highest PI vehicle, S1824, when equipped with snow tyres, by the way. This thing stock starts at A800. It is a drift skills boost vehicle, which made me think maybe it'd be more set up to drift, but it's still got all-wheel drive and everything, so I'm not quite sure why it's a drift skills bonus car. There you go. Anyways, the Ford Focus RS, I do like the modern Ford Focus RS. I like pretty much every generation of Focus RS. I will say, the new one's probably my least favourite just because I've spoke before, I'm not a huge fan of these all-wheel drive hot hatches, although to be fair the Focus RS is my favourite out of, you know, this, the A45 AMG, the RS3 and the, what's the one, the Golf R. This is my favourite out of those, although I'd still much rather take the 2017 Civic Type R. That being said, the Horizon Edition, what is it like? It's pretty well rounded. You know, it's an all-wheel drive car with a decent amount of power, not too much weight. You know, how would you expect it to be? The closest thing that's gone up to it is the A45 AMG. This was better than that. This can understeer though, and it can understeer, you know, pretty moderately if it gets its own way. So you do have to be a little bit careful in that regard. It's not gonna hold your hand. You know, it will understeer off the track if you let it. It is a pretty quick vehicle though, being the most powerful car here today, you know, even with only 350 horsepower, compared to everything else here today, it does feel very, very quick indeed, and yeah, it is a solid car, that's essentially what it is. Ultimately, I do like the Focus, again, as I said, and the Horizon Edition is pretty cool. You can seek these things out. You can buy them for pretty much nothing these days, considering they always come up in the Wheelspins. So, yeah, I mean, it's alright. I wouldn't particularly hugely recommend it, but, you know, if you need a car to drive, I wouldn't really tell you avoid it like the plague. Anyways, our final car for today is the 2012 Jeep Wrangler Rubicon, 285 horsepower, 260 foot-pounds, or 4,129 pounds of weight, B-class car, 653 in PI. It is the lowest in PI vehicle here today. It is also the heaviest vehicle here today. However, I do have to point out this thing weighs 3 pounds less than it should, because I believe it's the bonnet modifications I made. You know, the snorkel. I think that actually reduces weight. Weirdly enough, the body cladding around it puts on weight, but the hood bonnet thing sort of reduces the weight. It's weird. I don't quite understand it. Anyways, the Wrangler. You know, it's a staple of America. I don't particularly hate the Wrangler. I don't particularly care for it, though. Ultimately, it's a bit of a meh car for me. I wouldn't ever own one, but I wouldn't be too offended if someone bought me one, I guess. I would prefer the 4-door variant, just because I prefer 4-door vehicles over 2-doors. But, yeah, the Wrangler's a cool enough vehicle. Anyways, what is it like to drive? It's alright. I mean, 285 horsepower should be a decent amount, but the problem is the car weighs over 4,000 pounds, which is getting on to ridiculous levels of weight. As a result, it is slow, and it does lug. It does lug a lot. It isn't particularly helped by the gearbox in this thing, which really is not very good at all. It's very long ratios. I'm not too sure. I believe this might be a 4-speed or a 5-speed. But yeah, the gearbox is stupid long. It can roll, it can lean through the corners, which is a little bit concerning, but it's an alright vehicle. You know, I wouldn't recommend it for racing by any stretch of the imagination, but if you got stuck on a hill and it's the only option you've got, it's not terrible. Yeah, again, I'm sure you could probably do something with it. If you put it into S1900, put a stupid engine in it, and watched it fly, I can imagine it'd be quite entertaining. In its stock form, it's not fun to drive at all, but I mean, it sort of just exists, the Wrangler these days. So yeah, that's genuinely all I can really say about it. Anyways, on to the times, and it is the Ford Focus RS Horizon Edition. Unsurprisingly, that's our fastest car today, going into 21st with a 208.225. Does beat the Ram Runner Horizon Edition, which is kind of interesting. Also beats the 458 Italia Upgrade Hero. Beats the A45 by over 2 seconds, although that's not hugely surprising. Pretty good showing from that car, though. Next up, we find our sort of contingent of cars. 42nd sees the Honda NSX-R with a 217.004. The Penhall is just beneath that with a 217.671 in 43rd place. And the Lancia Delta Integrale is in 47th with a 218.472. So the Koala did pretty darn good overall. The Delta beats an Astra VXR, which is pretty impressive. And the NSX-R, yeah, all very impressive times from those vehicles, really. I mean, the NSX, the closest thing to it, probably the E36 beats that by a second, but the Koala was probably the biggest star of that group. Just, I was not expecting the car to be as good as it was. And finally, we find the Wrangler Rubicon in 79th, where 225.879 goes in between the Impala and the FCRX7. Yeah, that is really not a bad time from the Wrangler. I was not expecting it to place that highly. Ultimately, I still wouldn't recommend the car, but that's not a bad time. Anyways, friends, that is it for this sort of special episode of Reach the Peak. As always, if you have cars that you'd like to request for this series, simply type them down below in the comment section, and I will add them to my list. Thank you all very much for watching, friends. My name has been The Real Emile, and until next time, a farewell.